Welcome to the show again. This is your host, Lo Jackson. This is the You Only podcast, and this is our third season. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my last book that I did, which was Propaganda. It was a pretty good read. Edward Bernays, he did an excellent job on that book, and he's really actually a wild person. Today, I'm going to be reading to you The Road Less Traveled by Arthur M. Scott Peck. The book is divided into 4 parts. It was a 1983 New York Times bestseller, and it stayed there for more than 10 years, and it was translated into over 20 languages. And today I'm going to be explaining to you how this book really affects the brain, how it can be used, what it means for people going through hard times in life, because that's what this book is really for. Is, this book, it was expressed by him when it was written. It had been out for several years before it hit a New York Times bestseller. He said it was a sleeper, and I think M. Scott Peck did an excellent job in explaining, the world is a difficult place. It's hard. How was your week, you guys? Did it turn out okay? Did you have anybody pulling out in front of you, flipping you the bird? Yeah, that happened to me this week. It was interesting. I just actually tried to be a silent observer all week of people around me. And I realized so many people use so many different types of trigger baits. There's rage bait, loyalty bait, gossip bait, in the workplace, at the gas station, at school, and all kinds of different social settings. And it's interesting that people have lost social clout. They've lost respect and honor amongst ourselves and to each other. We owe that stuff to each other because we're human beings. We all make mistakes. We all have been in terrible situations that no one understands but ourselves. And thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. And hopefully you did listen to my last podcast, Propaganda. I thought it did well. It's had multiple listens already, and I think it was a really good turnout. I had listened to it several times before I posted it, and I hadn't done a podcast or editing in such a long time, but I finally found my little groove, and I got a little time now, and I wanted to get back to you guys. I know you've been patiently waiting for me to come back, and hopefully you're out there listening, and if you are, I appreciate you, each and every one of you. If you want to give me a 5-star review over on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get your listening, or whatever platform that you use, please give me a review even. I'd appreciate it. And thank you again for listening to the You Only podcast. And this is The Road Less Traveled by Arthur M. Scott. Peck was born on May 22nd, 1936 in New York City, the son of Zabeth and David Warner Peck, an attorney and judge. His parents were Quakers. Peck was raised as a Protestant. His paternal grandmother was from a Jewish family, but Peck's father denied himself as a WASP and not as a Jewish person, and that means white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. His parents sent him to the prestigious boarding school of Philip Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire. When he was 13, in his book, The Road Less Traveled, he confides the story of his brief stay in Exeter and admits that it was a most miserable time. Peck was married to Lily Hull in 1959, and they had 3 children, and in 1994 they jointly received the Community of Christ International Peace Award. While Peck's writings emphasized the virtues of disciplined life and a delayed gratification, his personal life was far more turbulent. For example, in his book, In Search of Stones, Peck acknowledged having extramarital affairs and being estranged from two of his children. In 2004, just a year before his death, Peck was divorced by Lily, and he remarried Kathleen Klein Yates. The book, The Road Less Traveled, was published in 1978, and like I said earlier, he stated that the book was a sleeper, and it had been read by a lot of people, and it caught on by word of mouth, and once it caught on by word of mouth, it hit the New York Times bestseller in 1983. It is in short a description of the attributes that make for a fulfilled human being, based largely on his experiences as a psychiatrist and as a person. In part one, I think that part one kind of resonated with me right away. As soon as I read it, I have had the craziest week. I was going out to my car from work, and I was about a half a foot from putting my badge down, and this guy was coming in the door. He badges on the other side, like jumps in front of me when there's another lane coming in, but he jumps in the opposite lane going out and goes in front of me. And I just thought, what is going on in here? And then that night on my way home, I was in a construction zone, and it was 45, so I was like, well, I'm not going to speed, so I slowed down. Next thing I know, a semi comes flying up to me doing 70, honking his horn, flashing his bright lights, swerved over to the side on the shoulder. I'm like, what in the world, guy, are you doing? I'm like, are you trying to kill somebody? I'm like, I'm just going to cruise. But part one is really about discipline in my eyes. And in chapter one, Mr. Peck writes pretty much life is difficult. Chapter one's about life being difficult. And the main idea, accept suffering as a normal part of life, which is tied to Carl Jung's theory of all the things that happen to you are just circumstances, deny trauma. Brain areas activated when you read chapter one would be the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational acceptance of hardships. And a lot of us go through hardships in life that we get stuck. We feel in a childlike state, or internally we're turmoiled by this confliction or whatever had gone on before us. But in reality, if we learn to just say, hey, them people, I wasn't in control of those people's actions, and I can't help what they think or do. I can only go inside of myself and know that I am enough for me, and that I can be mindful of my emotions and watch over my emotions by using the governor of my mind, which is your medial temporal lobes. And I had talked about that in my last podcast, Propaganda. Go back and check it out. It was a good one. And so while reading chapter one, I was really drawn to what parts of the brain were being activated once I read that, and decided it was about discipline, like disciplining your brain and for rational acceptance of hardships. And that's a part of life. Life ain't always rainbows and butterflies and sunshine and kisses and great times. But also this book activates the anterior cingulate cortex. And that's for confronting pretty much discomfort. And a lot of us, we don't like to, confront discomfort, because what everybody is addicted to in today's times is comfort. You have a phone, you're on it, you're scrolling aimlessly for hours. You're caught in technology loops for weeks, and then your phone's reminding you used 2 more hours than you did last week. And that's kind of interesting, because it is something to be mindful of what you're doing. Well, I wanted to explain to you what the anterior cingulate cortex is, and it's pretty much like when you see a brain. If you were to hold a plastic brain in your hand, the front of the brain, would be in your left hand, and just behind that brain matter, right there in the front, that's where your anterior cingulate cortex is, and it's a part of the brain region in the frontal lobe, or your medial temporal lobes, or your frontal lobes, that plays a part in emotion, motor functions, how you move, and decision making. And it takes mindfulness to be able to cultivate your brain to come out of fight, flight, trauma responses, or avoidant attachment styles, or whatever it is, these things that are, you're going through, whatever it is, if you're ADHD, ODD, autistic, a lot of us have a lot of issues right now, and we have to learn how to govern the mind. And that's the hardest thing for anybody to do. And the anterior cingulate cortex, it's located in the cingulate cortex, which wraps around the, pretty much the front part of your brain. It's pretty much a bundle of nerve fibers, and is connected to both the limbic system, associated with emotions, and the prefrontal cortex, associated with cognition, which is intelligence, like your ability to do things. And because, without ability, you have to be talented. And some people are able to communicate different parts of their brains, and that's natural talent, and that's how it comes out. Emotional expressions and awareness, pain management, attention, allocation, automatic nerve system response, error detection, and monitoring self-performance. That is everything that the anterior cingulate cortex does. Sorry, guys. I do appreciate you guys for listening. Hopefully you're enjoying me teaching you about The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. I just had a call. Sorry about that. Somebody was beeping in, trying to interrupt our time here. I'm like, don't be interrupting me and my people out here. We're trying to vibe right now. Thank you guys for listening. And so, the effect of Chapter 1, it strengthens cognitive control and distress tolerance. It trains the brain to endure difficulty rather than avoid it. It activates the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of logic, discipline, and decision making. Peck's focus on delaying gratification and facing hard truths activates your prefrontal cortex, which governs self-control, rational thinking, planning, and future-oriented behavior. And readers are challenged to pretty much like override emotional impulses in favor of long-term growth. This strengthens executive functions. And that makes sense because he really did write a really well-rounded book. I mean, it sold well with me. And if you want to check it out, you can find it on the internet. It's on Google Books. You can find it on Audible and several other different places like Amazon, eBay. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast again. And hopefully you're enjoying The Road Less Traveled. In Chapter 1, he says, life is difficult, if that is not the truth. That was the biggest part I had really gotten out of Chapter 1. It resonated with me hard because I really did have a tough week. I had another guy rage bait me twice on the job, and I just went to him and said, hey, I just want peace over here. But life is difficult. This is a great truth. Once we truly know that life is difficult, life is no longer difficult. And the significance of that is Peck introduces acceptance as foundational to growth. Acknowledging uncomfortable realities reduces suffering, a cognitive shift akin to acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and stoic resilience. The psychological linkage here is accepting inevitable pain aligns with principles of mindfulness-based stress reduction and trauma resilience frameworks, where acknowledging rather than denying hardships underpins healing. And that's why I expressed what I did, with Carl Jung's theory. And in chapter 2, this chapter is tools of discipline like delayed gratification, responsibility, truth, and balancing. And he says, delaying gratification is a process of scheduling the pain to enhance the pleasure. So delaying gratification is a process of scheduling the pain to enhance the pleasure. Mental health is an ongoing process of dedication to reality at all costs. And that's why we got to learn to be more mindful. And I think if we understand how books and our brain are tied together and how these books make our brain feel and think different ways, if we learn about the brain, I feel like it would activate more quickly for people if they knew what their brain was doing instead of no one ever teaching anyone about it. And the psychological linkage, delayed gratification, connects to Miss Jell's marshmallow experience and gratification models, which, if you were wondering what the marshmallow theory is the marshmallow experiment is one of the most famous studies in psychology conducted by Walter Mischel at Stanford University in the late 1960s and early 70s. It explored delayed gratification, our ability to resist an immediate reward in order to get a better one later, and it became a cornerstone in the study of self-control, willpower, and predictive behavior in children. So, what was the marshmallow experiment? I'll tell you in just one moment.
Hi, I'm Grace from the Philippines. Mabuhay! And I'm listening to the You Only podcast. I'm a huge fan.
The marshmallow experiment is one of the most famous studies in psychology conducted by Walter Mischel at Stanford University in the late 1960s and early 70s. It explored delayed gratification, our ability to resist an immediate reward in order to get a better one later, and become a cornerstone in the study of self-control, willpower, and predictive behavior in children. The experiment took children aged around 4 to 6. They were placed alone in a room with a single marshmallow, or sometimes a cookie or pretzel. The researcher told the child, you can eat this marshmallow now, or if you wait until I come back, you'll get 2 marshmallows. Then the researcher left the room for 15 minutes. What happened? Some kids ate the marshmallow almost immediately. Others distracted themselves by singing, covering their eyes, turning away, and waited successfully for the second marshmallow. And what did it show? The findings initial studies showed that children who delayed gratification tended to have better academic performances, higher SAT scores, better social and emotional coping, lower rates of substance abuse, healthier body weight years later. Ms. Chells concluded that self-control in early childhood is predictive by success later in life. Later research and updates challenges the original conclusion, and the follow-up studies, especially one in 2018, it found that the effect wasn't as strong when you factored in social economic background, parental education, home environment. In short, kids from more stable environments were better at waiting, not just because of innate willpower or because it was because they trusted the adult would come back with the other marshmallow. And the psychological concept of it connects to delayed gratification, choosing long-term gain over immediate reward, self-regulation, managing impulses, emotions, and behavior in pursuit of goals, executive functions, skills like planning, impulse control, and mental flexibility, which that's your frontal cortex. Trust and environment. Children from unpredictable homes may prioritize immediate reward, and that's a scarcity mindset. And the connection to modern psychology and neurology, this affects the prefrontal cortex, and that's activated when resisting impulses and planning ahead. It also affects the dopamine system. It drives immediate reward-seeking behaviors. And another system it affects is behavioral economics. Chapter 2 is really awesome because it teaches us tools of discipline, really, delaying gratification, acceptance of responsibility. And none of us want to accept responsibility. I mean, it's a lifelong lesson to every individual on the planet how important responsibility is about every aspect of your life and learning to protect yourself in every way you can. In chapter 2, there's pretty much a dedication to truth and balancing. The brain areas that this chapter affects are your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and this part of the brain is executive planning and resisting impulsivity. It also affects the orbital frontal cortex, which this is in charge of evaluating future rewards over instant gratification. And that's something that you have to learn to tame and realize why and what is the root cause of this impulse. The effect enhances willpower, self-regulation, and long-term thinking in chapter 2. Thank you guys for listening to You Only Podcast, The Road Less Traveled by author M. Scott Peck. This is a great read. Check it out. Chapter 3 is neurosis and legitimate suffering. And the main idea, facing pain leads to healing. Avoidance leads to dysfunction. And the brain areas that it affects is the amygdala. And we talked about that in my last podcast, propaganda. This part of the brain is in charge of emotional memory and fear response. Fight, flight, fawn, freeze. The hippocampus is affected from this chapter as well. Reframing emotional memories. And that's the part of the brain that makes up and lies and takes other people's stories and interjects it into your memories. And the effect of chapter 3 is it engages emotional processing, helping you relabel pain as something necessary for growth, which may reduce anxiety and avoidance. So chapter 3 is really important. And when I read chapter 3, I was thinking about my week, and because this guy really opened up this book and it hits you so hard, the first line. Once you read it, you'll get it. And A quote from this chapter is, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. And the significance of that is Peck distinguishes between healthy pain, such as growth, and neurotic pain, which is avoidance. And that's why a lot of people in the world today feel that avoidance feeling, or avoidant attachment styles, dictate all kinds of different men in America, making them less productive. And it's sad. Also, the significance is facing legitimate suffering fosters maturity. And hopefully, if once you read chapter 3, you'll realize that facing legitimate suffering fosters maturity. That's so important, and it's something that we all need to work on and cultivate. And the psychological theories behind this chapter, this pretty much echoes Carl Jung's view and parallels the concept of post-traumatic growth, that adversity, when consciously processed, can result in deeper meaning and resilience. So part 2 of this book, because this book is broke up into 4 different parts, and part 2 is about love, and that's chapters 4 and 5. And chapter 4, myth of romantic love, and a key quote: love is the extension of oneself for the spiritual growth of someone else. And the significance of this chapter, love is pretty much redefined as intentional and growth oriented, not simply a feeling. And we all know that, I hope, and maybe some people don't, but love is redefined as intentional and growth oriented, not simply a feeling. The psychological linkage in this chapter, this reframing aligns with self-determination theory and attachment theory, emphasizing active empathy and secure rational bonds. Chapter 5 is defining love. And a quote from that chapter: it is not selfish or unselfish that distinguishes love from non-love. It is the aim of the action. And I think the significance of this chapter from Peck's point of view, it pretty much moves beyond romantic idealism that distinguishes love from non-love. And I think it is the aim of the action. And the significance of that, Peck moves beyond romantic idealism and reframing mature love as purposeful nurturing. And I think that's how all love should be, because love heals a multitude of sins, and that's why the Bible says so much about love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is never boastful. The psychological theories behind this chapter is pretty much it strong parallels with Keegan's social cognitive development theory and the transition to self-authorship, where love becomes mutual growth rather than dependency. And thank you guys again for listening to You Only Podcast. And hopefully you're learning a lot about M. Scott Peck and the road less traveled. Because part 2 was about love, the myth of romantic love, and chapter 5 was love defined as spiritual growth. And the brain areas that chapter 5 affected would be your medial prefrontal cortex, which that's in charge of social cognition, which that's your social awareness skills, how you are aware of other people's emotions, but you're also able to manage your own emotions at the same time. And that's a part of emotional intelligence. And the way emotional intelligence is measured is on a quotient scale, and it pretty much scales your emotional quotient, and that's what your intelligent level is, or your cognition level. And in chapter 5, the default mode network, that's something he talks about, and it's a spiritual reflection and personal meaning. So you should check that out definitely. And the effect, it deepens capacity for selfless connection and mature empathy in this chapter. It activates circuits used in compassion and meditation. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. This is your boy Lo Jackson, and we are doing The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, and part 3, Growth in Religion. And in chapter 6, the role of belief and worldwide. Main idea of this chapter, I think, unquestioned beliefs hinder growth. Conscious belief system supports it. The brain areas that are affected by this chapter are the prefrontal cortex for abstract reasoning and belief evaluation. It also affects the posterior cingulate cortex involved in moral and religious thinking. So that's kind of awesome, because morals are passed down to us through religious practices, TV, entertainment, podcasts, whatever our minds have been infiltrated and that we decided was good or bad. We chose those things to be a part of our morals. And, chapter 6 pretty much is like, it encourages neuroplasticity by challenging entrenched patterns and opening the brain to new cognitive frameworks, because that's the growth and religion part of that chapter. And without religion, I don't think there would be growth. It would be hard to have growth without God or to believe in something. And the key ideas Peck emphasizes pretty much examining inherited belief systems and revisiting one's worldview consciously. And a lot of universities now push their worldviews, and a lot of them are pretty really out there compared to 30 years ago and what their views were at those colleges all around America and all around the world, honestly. The psychological linkage in chapter 6 is it ties to I can't think of it. Constructivism, developmental theories, and that's such as Keegan's, which describes involving stages of belief from conformist to principled and self-authored identity. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast, and hopefully you're enjoying The Road Less Traveled. Chapter 7 is Religion of Science and Skepticism. Here is a quote from Peck. Our view of reality is like a map. If the map is false, we will be lost. The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck is not just a book. It is a profound psychological and spiritual compass for those brave enough to confront life as it is with fierce clarity and unwavering honesty. Peck begins the unflinching truth: life is difficult, but with this truth lies freedom. He teaches us by embracing pain rather than avoiding it, we awaken discipline required for personal evaluation. This is a call to those who are tired of running from responsibility, to those who long to rise above emotional chaos and self-deception. Through the pillars of delayed gratification, radical self-honesty, and courageous love, Peck lays out the foundation for a life of authenticity, resilience, and spiritual depth. This work is not for the faint of heart. It demands soul work. Peck dismantles our illusions of romantic love and replaces them with something far more powerful. Love as a deliberate act of will, a sacred commitment to nurture growth in ourselves and others. He invites readers into the sacred arena where psychology and spirituality converge, urging us to question everything we are taught to believe. And then, just as we begin to break open, he introduces the mystery of grace, the unseen force that intervenes when we commit to growth, even when it terrifies us. The road left traveled is a mirror, a challenge, and a roadmap for those who are ready to stop surviving and start traveling. Thank you for listening to the You Only podcast. Please give me a 5-star review. I appreciate each and every one of you. I do appreciate all the comments I get. I enjoy every fan out there, every listener. Heather, you know I'm listening. I know you're listening. I know it's you. I know Joe's out there listening, and also all my other people I work with. Thank you guys for following me, sharing me. If you find something interesting about my podcast, please share it with other people. This is a podcast for empowerment, growth, understanding. I am trying to learn different things throughout life, and this is something that I found interesting nearing the age of 40, and it is interesting. It is mind-blowing, all the different neurological books out there, all the research done on how we heal ourselves, how we manifest ourselves, and how we grow into wonderful people, and how we inspire others to be themselves and to stop bellowing and being down in the dumps and overlooking other people's greatness just for self-gratification and all the stupid things that go on in the workplace between people, of relationships and all the crap that it's weird, you know. It's like work isn't for relationships, it's for work and for a company to grow and profit, and us to make something for somebody else to use and make life easier. Hopefully you enjoyed this read. Get out there, the road less traveled, it's waiting for you, and hopefully you'll take the road less traveled from now on after reading this book and kind of getting an understanding of it. It was a New York Times bestseller in 1983. Get out there and check it out. And also check out my last podcast, which was Propaganda. I've done all kinds of different podcasts. Go back there and check some of them out. The Red Book by Carl Jung, that's a good one. So many different ones. My number one podcast is by Dr. Vincent Norman Peale, and I hope that you would listen to that one. It's had over, I think, 32,000 listens at this point, and I've done several podcasts that are really big listens, but that's one of my favoriteest ones. But this one's also going to be a great one, and I appreciate you guys for listening and for giving me a review, or just listening or passing me on to your friends. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'll hear from you and you'll hear from me, and we'll learn a few things together and we'll grow together. And that's what life's about, is growing, developing, community, freeness, openness with information, and being aware that a lot of information out there ain't real, and a lot of information is fake, and it's up to you to fact check and find a place that'll give you factual information about everything that's going on around you, because there's even picture fact information. You know, you gotta fact check pictures you see now, because artificial intelligence can do anything with pictures now. It's wild. But thank you guys again for listening, and hopefully you're learning and growing. I appreciate you so much.